Yep, this video is exactly what it looks like. Basically, I found and ranked everything in Star Wars that I could think of. The best Jedi, best Sith, best opening scenes, best villains, and so much more. So if that's what you expected, then I think you really like this video, and let me know in the comments what you think. Enjoy. I found the 15 coolest villains in all of Star Wars, and in this video, I'm going to rank them from absolute worst to absolute best. Now, be warned, this list contains more than just Sith. I'm including bounty hunters, commanders, and even some cyborgs in the mix. But without further ado, let's get into it. We're gonna kick off the list at number 15 with General Hux. Now, I will admit, in The Force Awakens, General Hux was like, at least a cooler character, you know? The movie actually made him into a somewhat commanding figure, and he did have that sick scene where he was yelling at those stormtroopers and giving that speech as Starkiller Base blew up all those planets. That was a great scene. And so when I watched that, I was like, alright, maybe next movie he'll be as good or better. I mean, why wouldn't I assume that he would be as cool and as intimidating in the next movie as he was in this one? Ah, come on, man. Well, maybe he'll get better in the next movie. Oh, come on! How is this guy a spy? He literally blew up like 8 planets. He probably killed trillions of people. Can you imagine for a second if 1 year before World War II came to an end, German Chancellor Adolf Hitler came to the Allies and asked if they wanted to get some friendship bracelets? Oh, Winston Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt would take that opportunity so quickly, it's not even funny. I mean, personally, I would trust the most evil man on the planet if he asked if we could be friends again. What could possibly go wrong? Anyway, what I am saying is that Hux did have potential, but as a result of making him the biggest joke in the sequels, well, I guess the second biggest joke, because you can't really beat Finn when it comes to that, he is ranked at number 15 on my list. Up next at number 14 is none other than the Grand Inquisitor himself. I just know that Dave Filoni thought this guy was going to be so cool when he made him, and I think that diehard Rebels fans do really like him, but to me, the Grand Inquisitor always felt like such a generic sidekick, you know? It's like in a high school drama movie, where the main bully, i.e. Darth Vader, has a big muscly goon who follows him around and does his dirty work, i.e. the Grand Inquisitor, but when the main character of the movie learns, like, I don't know, how to get a life, or probably just kung fu, the goon gets absolutely smacked by the main character. Honestly, to me, that kind of feels like the plot of Rebels, at least in the first couple of seasons. And on top of that, I also despise the Grand Inquisitor's lightsaber. What makes a double-bladed lightsaber cool in the first place is when the user can actually use it well. It's actually impressive when you can spin it in cool ways by yourself without a big machine in the hilt making it do it for you. And when you tap a button to make the lightsaber spin by itself while you stand there with your arm out grinning like a 4th grader who just discovered what Nutella was for the first time, it's really not impressive whatsoever and you look like a dork. So because of that, the Grand Inquisitor is number 14 on my list. Alright, at number 13 we have Supreme Leader Snoke. Snoke is actually wildly similar to General Hux in the sense that he was also cool and interesting in The Force Awakens. But then Rian Johnson came along and subverted all of our expectations because everyone knows that's why The Last Jedi was such a great Star Wars movie, you know? I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the most popular Star Wars movie of all time and the fans absolutely loved it. But the difference between Hux and Snoke was that Snoke was actually cool for the beginning of The Last Jedi. We walk into that throne room for the first time and Snoke's in there hitting people with Force lightning, and then Rey walks in, and I gotta say, when Rey was getting clowned on by Snoke, I was the 4th grader who just discovered Nutella, because I was grinning from ear to ear in that theater. Honestly, if Snoke had just kept that up for, I don't know, the rest of the sequel trilogy and been the main villain, then maybe he would have actually been higher on this list. But you know, it's like I often say, there's nothing quite like getting a lightsaber through the old breadbasket to make someone look like an absolute chump. After this scene, it was really hard for me to look at Snoke and see anything other than an absolute fool for letting a lightsaber get spun 90 degrees right in front of him and then ignite through his body. He was definitely not a very cool villain, especially compared to some of the other big baddies coming up in this video. And because this list does go from worst villain in Star Wars to best villain in Star Wars, I promise that you will absolutely want to stick around to see who is the all-time best. So stay tuned for that. Alright, time to move on. Next up on the list at number 12 is the one, the only Gustavo Fring, proud owner of the Los Pollos Hermanos chicken restaurant. And man, those guys got the best fried chicken in all of New Mexico, believe me. Gustavo Fring is a kind-hearted man and a dedicated member of his community who has some absolutely cutting-edge ideas. And let me tell you, when I say this guy does not skip chest day, he does not skip chest day. Oh, the amount of money I would give just to feel those. Ugh. Well, that's neither here nor there. But obviously I'm talking about the Mandalorian's greatest foe, Moff Gideon. Like the entire Mandalorian show, Moff Gideon has slowly gotten worse and worse with each passing season. Because in season 1, I'll be honest, he was a pretty good villain. But then in season 2, he got thrown into the ending because the writers obviously forgot that they needed a grand finale for the season. And then in season 3, he got brought back again, and now he's trying to clone himself so that he has the Force, which I gotta admit is a really weird plot point. I mean, you've gotta be, what, 70? You're not exactly a spring chicken anymore, and your plan is to make organic copies of yourself, try to stuff the Force into them like a fat guy stuffing soggy fries down his swollen throat, pray desperately that you could find some makeshift way to teach these clones how to use the Force that they now have. And that's assuming that your plan to put the Force inside of them in the first place actually worked, and if, only if, all of that goes according to plan, then you just gotta hope desperately that they'll submit to your authority, because after all, you taught them how to use the Force, so they're probably more powerful than you. Yeah, seems like an absolutely brilliant plan to me, personally. Anyway, as much as I do love Moff Gideon's incredibly realistic Halloween costumes, I just don't think that he's that interesting as a villain, and it feels like whenever the show wants you to feel the stakes a little more, they just give him an upgrade. He already starts off with a battalion of stormtroopers. Well, not enough. Alright, let's give him the Darksaber. Gonna have to do better than that. Okay, what about a troop of killer death robots? No, scratch that. An army of loyal Beskar armored soldiers. Yeah, not quite there yet, buddy. Fine. Literal Mandalorian Beskar armor with these sick looking horns on top. I mean, what else can I even say anymore? Regardless, I think the number 12 spot is a good place for Gustavo to sit at. Number 11 is the Clone Wars legend himself, Savage Opress. Now look, I actually do like Savage quite a bit, but the problem with him is that he's literally discount Darth Maul. That's it. And at least Maul got his skill from years of training, whereas Savage was a scrawny runt who bulked for like 4 seconds, and then spent like 2 more minutes learning how to use the Force. And all of a sudden, he's this crazy powerful maniac that no one in the galaxy can stop. And then for the rest of the show, he proceeds to have no more character development whatsoever. So while he is cooler than the first 4 characters on this list, he just can't compare to the 10 that are coming up. At number 10, we have Kylo Ren. Now, in a YouTube short of mine, I accidentally called him a Sith, and I got absolutely roasted in the comments, because apparently, he's not a Sith. So that's that. Anyway, Kylo Ren is by far the lamest Sith Lord in Star Wars. Like a lot of characters on this list, he was kind of cool in The Force Awakens, and I gotta say, his lightsaber is absolutely dope. But then he started taking off his helmet and whining and screaming and getting destroyed in every single fight he got into, and I just completely lost interest in the guy. Besides, maybe he shouldn't even be on this list in the first place, because canonically, he did die a good guy, so I'm not really sure how that works. Then again, to quote Gandalf, I'd be a fool of a took if I didn't put Darth Vader on this list, and he's technically a good guy now too. So for now, Kylo Ren can live at the number 10 spot. Up next at number 9 is Jango Fett. Jango Fett is a pretty cool guy, and I actually think he's a good character, but the problem is that we only see him for a couple of minutes. And while he does have one good fight with Obi-Wan and then an epic space battle, he dies pretty quick after that. The best part about Jango is definitely his gadgets and gizmos, and I gotta admit, from a technology standpoint, he's by far the best in the biz. He's got a jetpack, a grappling wire, a surface-to-air missile on his back, razor blades on his gauntlets, a flamethrower, and some pretty dope weapons on Slave 1. And those are the things that we know about. The reason I've ranked him about the middle of the list is because if you think about it, that's probably where he belongs. He's cool enough to not be at the bottom, but there are way better villains who definitely deserve to be above him. And if you're some Jango Fett stan who doesn't like that, then you can go, I don't know, cry somewhere. Number 8 is Boba Fett, and I gotta say, the only reason that he's not ranked worse on my list is because his appearances in Clone Wars and The Mandalorian save him. I did not enjoy the Book of Boba Fett whatsoever. I thought it made him a wishy-washy, indecisive pushover and completely changed his character for no real reason whatsoever. And even though he was a literal child in the Clone Wars, he's still somehow cooler there than he was in his own TV show. And in The Mandalorian, he was the Boba Fett that everyone wanted to see, with ruthless fighting, vicious techniques, and a complete domination of any stormtrooper that got in his way. If the Book of Boba Fett had never existed, I would have ranked him way closer to the number 1 spot, because frankly, I just thought that the show was a complete betrayal of the character that everyone already liked. And it just showed that Disney has no grasp on what the audience wants to see or any understanding of the characters that they're messing with. Alrighty, this is where ranking these villains gets mighty tricky, because from now on, all of these villains are actually really cool, and ranking them from best to worst was very hard for me to do. So if you guys don't like where I put certain characters, feel free to let me know in the comments where you would have put them. And oh, that's right, before I forget, hello there everybody, my name is Jedward, and if this is your first time watching my channel, I make tons of videos about Star Wars and other franchises like it. And if you're enjoying this video so far, I'd really appreciate it if you'd smash that subscribe button. Thank you, and now on to the last half of this list. At number 7, we have none other than the hairless harpy herself, Asajj Ventress. Ventress is pretty interesting because she starts off as just a hardcore bad guy, and then over the course of the Clone Wars show, slowly starts to turn, I don't know, better? She was never morally perfect, but she got better. I will say, I'm a huge fan of her curved hilt lightsabers, so that's just an all-around W for me, and I like how over time, she became more of a complex character, and starts to get her own character development. However, one thing that I would recommend is that if she can physically grow hair, she really should, because the whole 3rd stage cancer patient undergoing intense chemotherapy look is really not something to strive for. And if you ever find anyone who would call Ventress, I don't know, easy on the eyes, then they're freaking lying, and you gotta call them out on that. Anyway, is there a... Wait, do you hear that noise? That's right, at number 6, we have none other than General Grievous. Grievous is really cool, because there's like no complexity to this guy, which usually is a bad thing in a character, I will admit, but it works for him, because now, he's nothing but an unrestrained beast with nothing holding him back. Let me put it this way. When a Clone Wars episode came on and the villain for the episode was going to be Grievous, you didn't really care about the plot that much. You were just excited because you knew darn well that at the end of the episode, there was going to be a sick lightsaber duel. And when this guy's arm split in half, whoo boy, you knew you were in for a treat. Although, I just gotta say it, I don't care how good you are with a lightsaber, if you have a single blade and you're going against some guy with 4 blades, it would not be that hard for him to kill you like that. I mean, literally, if you have 4 blades, you swing 2 of your lightsabers horizontally from opposite sides of him at the same time, and if they have 1 lightsaber, they can't block 2 coming different ways, so he gets split 5 ways from Sunday. But you know what? That's besides the point. At number 5, we have the legendary Cad Bane, who needs no introduction. Cad Bane is by far one of the best things to come out of the Clone Wars, and I would probably say that at this point in time, he is my favorite bounty hunter in all of Star Wars. Maybe if someone's TV show wasn't absolute garbage, it wouldn't be this way, but you know what? It is what it is. This guy's got that sick hat, those dual blasters, the coolest voice in the galaxy. I mean, just take a listen.
Hello there, little lady.
See what I mean? And on top of everything, he's actually a really crafty guy. He's like the opposite of Grievous, in the sense that when he's going to be in an episode, I can't wait to see his plan. Like that one time where he stole a clone trooper's armor and then snuck aboard a Republic Venator and then escaped off the Venator. Oh, pure gold. I was actually so mad when he got killed off in Book of Boba Fett. And on top of that, they didn't even make him look good in live action. Absolutely disgraceful. Coming in at number 4, we have Darth Maul. Darth Maul was already pretty cool when he appeared in Phantom Menace, what with his double-bladed lightsaber and crazy moves, but then Dave Filoni made the genius decision to throw him into Clone Wars, and that really brought him to the next level. The whole arc where Maul came back with his sick robot legs and became the literal king of Mandalore was awesome, and that season 7 finale with him versus Ahsoka was more legendary than me in the bathroom after a bad night at the all-you-can-eat buffet. Man, those fried shrimp really screwed me over. But yeah, not much more that I can say. He's like 3 times cooler than Savage Opress, and it's not even close. Getting into the top 3 now, you probably should have a pretty good idea in that old noggin of yours of who's coming up next. So it shouldn't be too much of a shock to you that at number 3, I put my boy Darth Sidious. This guy is by far the smartest character in Star Wars by every metric, and I would argue that he's maybe the most powerful villain too. Sidious has got no shortage of skills, and he's kind of a baller at literally everything, from force lightning to lightsaber fighting and overall skill with the force. Now, be warned, this coming up is a very hot take, and I think I'm probably one of the only people I know who thought this, but I did not like it whatsoever when they brought him back in The Rise of Skywalker. I know, surround my house with pitchforks and torches if you must, but I did not think that he was very cool in that movie, and honestly, in his duel versus Rey, I could not have cared less who won. But that does not change the fact that for the rest of Star Wars, this guy was an absolute Sigma, and the number 3 spot is perfect for him. Alright, and now for number 2, I've been looking forward to this. It's none other than Darth Tyrannus, better known as Count Dooku. Honestly, I seriously contemplated putting Dooku at the number 1 spot because if you've been around my channel before, you know that I am a huge Dooku fan. One of the many things that makes this guy so cool to me is that in the actual movies, Count Dooku isn't intrinsically a bad guy. He's just a man who sees the corruption in the Republic and the Jedi Order and thinks that the Separatists should have the right to break off and do their own thing. Then the Clone Wars rolled around and Dave Filoni did need a big bad guy, so he made Dooku like a maniacal sociopath, but it was still cool. Another thing that makes Dooku so epic is just how good he is with a lightsaber. I actually personally just think that his lightsaber is super cool on its own because, like I said earlier, your boy's a sucker for a nice curved hilt. But on top of that, he's so cool to watch in a duel because he's just insanely smooth and classy and suave and debonair. The James Bond of Star Wars, some have called him. Not me. Some. Not me. But some. On top of everything, he's so powerful with the Force, and when someone makes him mad, he just turns around very slowly and calmly hits them with a deadly blast of Force lightning. Oh man, what an absolute legend. I just love everything about this guy, and thank goodness the Clone Wars TV show centered around him, because in my opinion, he was criminally underused in the prequels movies. Alright, before I get to number 1, I just want to give some honorable mentions really quick. Pong Krell is definitely up there. I mean, what an absolute psychopath. I'm not sure he counts as a villain because he is loyal to whoever gives him the best deal, and I guess that's every bounty hunter, but regardless, Hondo Ohnaka is just an all-around great character, and he's literally Jack Sparrow, so I love that guy. Finally, Pre Vizsla was a cool character when he was alive, and that duel between him and Maul was just epic. Okay, at the number 1 spot, if you didn't see this coming, you're a complete idiot, or you just don't like Star Wars, because everyone knows that the coolest villain in all of Star Wars is, cue the music, Darth Vader. That's right, this Dark Lord of the Sith is definitely number 1, and there's a reason that every single human on planet Earth knows who he is. Along with being one of the most complex characters in all of cinema, his whole story from slave boy to Jedi to husband to cyborg to Sith is truly a beautiful arc. And on a more superficial level, that guy can swing a lightsaber. Holy cow, that scene from Rogue One was insane. Honestly, I think one of the best ideas for a Star Wars TV show would be tales of Vader's adventures around the galaxy. I mean, how cool would that be? You could take any of the dozens of comics about him and animate them or turn them into live action, and who wouldn't want to hear, "All I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men," in an actual TV show? I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about that. But I ranked the opening scene of every single Star Wars movie from absolute worst to absolute best, and to be honest, the results actually kind of shocked me. It turns out that some of the worst Star Wars movies actually have decent opening scenes, while on the other end of the spectrum, there are some incredible Star Wars movies with opening scenes that quite frankly aren't that good. I think you'll see what I mean in a minute here, so without further ado, let's get into it. First up, at the number 11 spot with the all-time worst opening scene in any Star Wars movie is Attack of the Clones. And this is probably surprising to a grand total of 0 people, because Attack of the Clones isn't exactly the most popular piece of film to ever be released. There are a few reasons that the opening scene is so disappointing, with the main one being that it's incredibly short. The scene only lasts for about 3 minutes, and in that time, all that happens is Padme comes to Coruscant, and as she lands, her ship blows up in a fiery explosion. But fear not, dear viewer, because the grand reveal is that Padme was actually flying in a Naboo starfighter, and she's safer than a toothless shark. Now, as is true with almost all of the opening scenes on this list, it's not so much that this scene is an awful piece of film. I mean, it does give context to the larger plot of the movie, which is that someone wants Padme dead. The biggest reason that this scene is last on the list is mostly because every other opening scene in this video is at least slightly better, whether that be more entertaining or more crucial to the plot of the movie, or heck, even just better CGI. I mean, I'm sorry, but the Star Wars movies from the 1970s look more realistic than this. And this explosion right here looks like the outro to the old Mr. Beast videos. Anyway, that's all well and done, and actually, that reminds me, I need to lay out a few rules for this video really quick. Basically, I'm defining an opening scene of a movie as the initial sequence of events in the movie that all line up with each other in a set timeline. Now, I'm going to do my absolute best to not let nostalgia influence my decisions, but ooh, that's gonna be hard for some of these scenes coming up later in this video, and I'm sure that some of you will feel the same way. However, I guarantee that very few, if any of you, will experience any nostalgia for this next scene, which at number 10 is the opening to The Rise of Skywalker. Basically, The Rise of Skywalker kicks off with Kylo Ren kicking the butts out of a bunch of Mustafarians, and then going to Exegol and meeting Emperor Palpatine. To its credit, the part of this scene where Kylo Ren absolutely decks these chumps is pretty sick, and it's basically one of the last times in the trilogy that Kylo Ren is actually cool. Although let me just say that that is not how lightsabers work at all. A lightsaber is a beam of pure energy, and therefore it would never get stuck on a person to the point that it would pick them up in the air and then throw them down like a sack of potatoes. To be fair though, this kind of thing happens all the time in Star Wars, and I can't really blame them for this mistake too much. Anyway, this scene gets really bad when Kylo Ren goes to Exegol and finds, to most Star Wars fans' absolute shock and horror, a reincarnated Emperor Palpatine, and thus kicks off one of the laziest plot points in the entire sequel trilogy. This entire opening sequence just feels bland and uninteresting, almost like the producers realized they needed some way to force the movie to make sense, and that's why I ranked it as the second worst opening scene in all of Star Wars. Entering now into single digits, at number 9 we have Never Tell 'Em the Odds. That's right, it's Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, personally, I kind of enjoyed this movie, even though I am aware that it's the least popular Star Wars movie of all time if you go by box office revenue. But in terms of opening scene, I am sorry to say that it is sorely lacking. Basically, the entirety of this scene involves a young Han Solo out in the town, and then he comes back to get his girlfriend Kira. Although since it is Star Wars, they felt the need to start the word with a Q and give Kira an apostrophe smack dab in the middle, of course. Anyway, Han throws a rock at the wall, Lady Proxima starts wailing and writhing, and Han and Kira both run away. This scene isn't terrible, but one of the most annoying things about it is how dark it is. Not like gritty and violent dark, but physically badly lit. And yeah, I know that's kind of the point, but you can make a scene in the dark while at the same time allowing the viewer to see what's going on, which unfortunately I simply can't in this scene. It's not a huge issue, but I just think it's very annoying. Personally, I don't think there's too much wrong with this opening scene, but it's just nowhere near as good as the opening scenes that are coming up later on in this video. At number 8, I'm very sorry to report that it's episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Now, when I was making this list, I thought that I was going to be able to put Return of the Jedi in the top 3, because with my faulty memory, I assumed that it opened with Jabba's palace, which in my opinion is one of the coolest and most interesting scenes in all of Star Wars. But you cannot imagine my disappointment when I went back to double check really quick and realized that ROTJ actually opens with this scene, where all they really do is introduce Emperor Palpatine in person for the first time and reveal that, whoa, the Empire has made a new Death Star, wow. Look, it's a scene that's necessary to the plot of the movie, and it is cool to see the Emperor in person for the first time, but it's not that exciting, it's not particularly interesting, and frankly, it's not anywhere close to how cool it would have been to kick off the movie with Jabba's palace. So while I completely understand why they had to put this scene here, it's with a heavy heart that I rank this at number 8 on my list. Up next at number 7 is Rogue One. Basically, the premise behind the Rogue One opening scene is that this random guy is living alone on some random planet with his wife and daughter, until that evil business owner from The Dark Knight Rises shows up and asks him to help him build the Death Star. Farmer guy says no, of course, and then he and his wife get killed, but luckily, Jin escapes. Honestly, this scene isn't even bad, it's just kind of formulaic. You know, generic bad guy shows up and kills parents, leaving the child to fend for themselves as an orphan, and then years later, the child confronts the generic bad guy. Same old, same old. But this scene does have Death Troopers in it for the first time in Star Wars live action, which is really cool. And this scene does play a pretty pivotal role later on in the movie, so it's about the middle of the list at the number 7 spot. spot. Alright, for the 6th best opening scene in Star Wars, we have none other than Episode 8, The Last Jedi, which may be a surprise to you, and hey, it was a surprise to me too, you're not alone. So let me explain what I mean. But first, hello there everybody, my name is Jedward, and if you're enjoying this video so far, you should really consider subscribing, because we are getting so close to 50,000 subscribers. Man, that is so many people. So thank you so much to all of you who are subscribed. I do really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And now let me talk about why I've put The Last Jedi at the number 6 spot. As much as I really do not like The Last Jedi whatsoever, and apparently I'm not alone, I gotta give it to them. The opening scene is actually one of the better scenes in the entire movie. Basically, the Resistance is evacuating their base and trying to escape until they're cut off by the First Order. Poe Dameron goes out in an X-Wing to meet them head on, and with the help of some bombers, he manages to completely destroy a dreadnought, after which the Resistance is able to escape. This whole sequence actually looks pretty good, and visually, it's really cool. Poe's entire attack on the dreadnought is very exciting and fun to watch, and if there's one thing that Rian Johnson gets right in the entire Last Jedi, and I mean that literally by the way, it's the only good thing he does, it's create amazing visuals. But at the same time, there's some awful dialogue between Hux and Poe that's supposed to be funny and goofy, but it's really not. And this scene is the beginning of the end of General Hux being a cool character. As for the bomber scene, these ships are just infuriating to look at, because they are the least practical things to ever exist. I mean, going about 2 miles per hour and then having to be directly over your target before you can drop your bombs makes no sense in space, and it's an awful design. But overall, I was surprised to find myself putting The Last Jedi at the middle of my list, and the opening scene is one of the more entertaining ones in the entire movie. Now we enter the top 5 opening scenes in all of Star Wars, and these last few could really go any way, because all of them are actually amazing ways to kick off a movie. But coming up at number 5 itself is the beginning of the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens. I gotta give it to J.J. Abrams. He really hit the ground running with this one, because despite the intense hatred for these movies that most Star Wars fans rightfully have, this beginning scene is really good. Poe Dameron is on Jakku trying to get half of the map to find Luke Skywalker, when all of a sudden the First Order comes in and starts ravaging the town. Poe sends the half of the map that he has away with BB-8 into the desert and goes to fight the First Order himself, but is captured and taken away. Simultaneously, Stormtrooper Finn refuses to fire upon innocent civilians and questions whether or not the First Order is really doing the right thing. Now, this whole scene has a lot going for it in a lot of different ways. First off, Kylo Ren is actually just a straight up awesome villain in this scene. He's cool, he's intimidating, he's ruthless, and he's got that epic lightsaber. Plus, he freezes a blaster bolt in midair with the Force, which has never happened before in a live action Star Wars movie. So that was a moment that I remember completely shocked the audience when I saw it in theater. On top of all of that, this scene starts off with the promise that the goal of the Resistance is to find Luke Skywalker, which initially left every fan, including me, insanely hyped. Ah, how naive of us. Little did we know what we were in for. Finally, to top it all off, this was the beginning of Finn's decision to desert the First Order, and at the time, based off of this scene, it's actually an interesting thing to see happen. That was at a moment in the sequel trilogy when Finn actually had potential and wasn't just a walking joke for the characters to abuse. Anyway, The Force Awakens definitely had the coolest opening scene of the entire trilogy, and personally, I never thought I'd put one of the Star Wars sequels in the top 5 anything, but here we are. For this next one, I'd recommend sitting down before you hear it, because at the number 4 spot, we have Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. That's right, what is commonly regarded amongst fans as the best Star Wars movie of all time, and it's not even in the top 3, so let me explain. First off, I have to clarify that Empire Strikes Back does not start off with the Battle of Hoth, and if it did, it would probably be higher on this list. How it actually starts is with the Empire sending out some probes to search for the rebels, and one of those probes lands on Hoth, which, by the way, is crazy luck, because there's apparently 1.3 million planets in all of Star Wars, and the Empire just happens to send probes to the one planet that actually has a rebel base. Anyway, when Luke goes to look for the probe, he gets attacked by a Wampa and dragged away to its cave. Using the Force, Luke pulls his lightsaber to himself in an epic moment and escapes, and then he sees Obi-Wan Kenobi's ghost, who tells him to go find Yoda. The best thing about this scene by far is that it shows us how far Luke has progressed in his Jedi training. He's now able to use the Force far better than he could in the last movie, but still not super well, and it was really creative of George Lucas to find a small side obstacle for Luke to overcome right in the beginning of the movie. Also, this scene does introduce the concept of Force ghosts and Obi-Wan's ability to guide Luke even in death, so that's pretty crucial. Finally, we get to see Han Solo use a lightsaber for the first and last time, and I mean, just how cool is that? It's like seeing Vampire Tow Mater. It only happens once, but when it does, you're a lucky son of a gun. You are. Alright, finally entering the top 3, I've been looking forward to this. It's the OG, that's right, Star Wars A New Hope. I'd be willing to bet good money on the fact that everyone alive has seen this classic shot of the Star Destroyer chasing Tantive 4, and this leads to the rebels being boarded, the Death Star plans being sent off to Tatooine, and Princess Leia being captured. By far the coolest thing in this scene is the introduction of Darth Vader, and George Lucas really played every trick in the book to tell us how evil this guy was. From the black, robotic, menacing suit, the ominous looking evil face mask, and who could possibly forget the iconic Vader theme? I mean, I know you've heard it before, but come on, just have another listen. Overall, overall, this opening scene was just such a classic way to kick off the original trilogy, and what an absolute banger of an introduction. Negotiating our way into the second best opening scene is, you guessed it, the Phantom Menace. And did you catch my little Easter egg there? You know, negotiations, like the title of this level in all the LEGO Star Wars games? No? It was a dumb joke anyway. This introduction to the entire prequel trilogy is absolutely awesome, and it starts off with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi going to the Trade Federation to negotiate a treaty, but it quickly turns into an all-out brawl between the Jedi, the battle droids, the destroyers, and more. When you think about how significant this scene is for the Star Wars universe, it's actually very impressive. I mean, the creators had to figure out a way to display the role of the Jedi in the galaxy at this time period, and they nailed it perfectly in this scene. On top of that, the only version of Obi-Wan Kenobi that anyone had ever seen up to this point was the 70-year-old Alec Guinness, so it must have been shocking to see Ewan McGregor take his place at a mere 25 years of age. Finally, something that unfortunately can't be said for a lot of the prequel trilogy, but the CGI in this scene actually looks pretty decent, and these are definitely some good effects for the time. Although, why do they have to force run? I mean, look how goofy this looks. I'd maybe expect this from a Saturday morning Tom and Jerry cartoon, but not from a movie with a budget of $115 million. I mean, come on. Anyway, I'm a big fan of the opening scene, and what a way to kick off the trilogy, but now it's time for, and wait, do you hear that? That's right, give us the Clone Wars theme, because the #1 best opening scene in Star Wars goes to Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. This long shot right here of them flying into battle is absolutely incredible, and it captivated 12-year-old me like nobody's business. It lasts for about 2 minutes, completely uncut, and there's so much going on here, but even after that, we get some great action, like dealing with buzz droids, dodging missiles, and leading clone pilots through an utter war zone. It's all just so epic. Plus, I found the 11 coolest Jedi in Star Wars, and in this video, I'm going to rank all of them from absolute worst to absolute best. So without further ado, let's get into it. At the number 11 spot, as the absolute worst Jedi in Star Wars, we have Anakin Skywalker. I'm kidding, it's obviously Rey. Look, even if you do like Rey, I'm pretty sure that you'd agree that she's simply not as good as the other Jedi in Star Wars on any comparable scale. And as for me, well, I don't like Rey, so in my opinion, she's downright awful. From the very start of the sequel trilogy, Rey was always a Mary Sue, being able to do crazy things without any training whatsoever. For example, resist Kylo Ren's mind reading, use the Force to call a lightsaber hilt dozens of feet into her waiting hands, and then, despite it being her first time physically holding a lightsaber ever, defeat trained Force user Kylo Ren in a duel. And get this, I'm only talking about The Force Awakens. There are still 2 more entire movies to go over, which I won't do here, because frankly, I'd like to keep this video shorter than 3 hours. It actually was kind of a disappointment though, because I think that Daisy Ridley is a pretty good actress, and it's not her fault whatsoever that the people writing her movies didn't know what they were doing. Again, if you like Rey, then that's great, keep living your life. But personally, I think that most people would agree that she's probably the worst Jedi on this list, especially when you compare her to some of the absolute legends that we have coming up later on in this video. So I'm gonna leave Rey right here at the number 11 spot. Coming in at number 10 is Ezra Bridger from the Rebels TV show. I think that some of you may be mad at that, but in my defense, I've only seen the first 2 seasons of the show, so I'm not really that fit to judge. But I just know that if I didn't put him on here, some of you would have thrown a fit in the comments, so here we are. I have heard that he gets really good right about where I stopped watching, around season 3, but I just don't know. Anyway, all that being said, I think that Ezra is kind of annoying in the beginning of Rebels, and as a Jedi, which is what this list is based off of, he's nowhere near as interesting or likable as someone like Kanan Jarrus or Ahsoka Tano. I'll give him this though, in terms of practicality, his original lightsaber was sick, with the blaster in the hilt, but I just gotta ask, who had the bright idea to make the lightsaber only able to shoot when the blade isn't active? I mean, this scene right here would have gone way differently if Ezra could have popped off a few quick shots lickety-split, but I digress. Entering single digits now, we have Princess Leia from The Rise of Skywalker. Pretty much the only reason that I have her here is because I don't know anything about her as a Jedi. We got about 1 flashback scene and that was it. And look, Princess Leia was a great character, but a great Jedi? I just don't know. Like literally, this whole selection boils down to I don't have the knowledge. But even with all that being said, I'd still rather take her over Rey or Ezra, so here we are at number 9. Up next at number 8, it's Kanan Jarrus from Rebels. Again, the reason that Kanan is here is mainly because even though he's a good character, he's simply not as good as some of the other characters in this video. But his whole story is really cool, and I like how he survived Order 66, but then continued to fight the Empire. In my opinion, it's a great way of writing a Jedi. Overall, I think that Kanan is kind of a hit or miss character. You either like him or you don't, and as for me, yeah, I like the guy. I think he's one of the better parts of Rebels as a whole, and he makes the entire show just a little bit better. Making its way to number 7, we have Mace Windu, and actually, I really like this fella, but here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about a tier list. If I wanted to put Mace Windu higher on the list, then I'd have to make somebody else lower. And to be perfectly honest, everyone else on this list is someone that I just straight up like more than Mace Windu. That's not to say that Mace Windu is bad though, in any way whatsoever. And because he utilized lightsaber form 7 called Vapad, he was constantly hovering in between the light and the dark side, which is actually how he managed to beat Emperor Palpatine in a duel. Oh yeah, that's right. As if having a Star Wars YouTube channel wasn't nerdy enough, I also know a thing or two about lightsaber forms. Don't try me, boys. Don't try me. On a separate note, we have Mace Windu, or rather Samuel L. Jackson, to thank for different colored lightsabers in Star Wars, because if you didn't know, good old Samuel straight up asked George Lucas if he could have a purple lightsaber. And I mean, come on. Who's gonna say no to Samuel L. Jackson? Just look at that face. Back when episode 7, The Force Awakens came out, there was this one YouTube video that I watched that had a theory that Supreme Leader Snoke was actually Mace Windu, and it was really convincing. So at that time, I thought for sure that he was going to come back in The Last Jedi and reveal himself to be Snoke. But alas, the actual answer to Snoke's identity was far more disappointing. So in my opinion, Disney really missed an opportunity with that one. Again, Mace Windu is not a bad Jedi whatsoever, but everyone coming up in this video is just a little bit better. And actually, that reminds me, because I know if I don't mention this, the comments will tear me apart. But no, Cal Kestis will not be on this list, and that is only because I've played like 1 hour of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. So again, I'm simply not fit to rank him. But if you have played Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor, let me know in the comments where you'd put Cal Kestis, because I'm actually curious. At number 6, it's Qui-Gon Jinn. I like Qui-Gon Jinn a lot. I think that he's a really interesting Jedi, and one of the things that was so great about him is that he began to see the faults in the Jedi Order before anyone else really could. Now, to be fair, a lot of this mistrust came from his former master, Count Dooku, back when Dooku was still a Jedi, and obviously Dooku had some serious issues with the Jedi Order and the Republic as a whole, which caused him to break off entirely. You guys didn't really think that I could go a whole video without mentioning Dooku, did you? Come on, if you've been around this channel before, then you know how much we like this guy. Anyway, the one thing that Qui-Gon was kind of lacking on was lightsaber skills, but I mean, given the time period, that was fair enough, man. The Sith hadn't been seen in thousands of years, and Qui-Gon's death was the slap in the face that the Jedi Order needed to start teaching lightsaber on lightsaber combat again. Coming in at number 5, you failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. It's none other than Luke Skywalker. Luke has been an icon for decades, and he has the pretty unique ability to have been my dad's hero in the 80s and then my hero 40 years later, showing just how influential he really was. Luke was a symbol of what the hero's journey should look like, getting whirled away from a quiet farm life on a desert planet, learning how to be a Jedi, and just going on this incredible adventure that defined a ton of kids' childhoods. On top of that, Mark Hamill is just a phenomenal actor, and he captured the essence of Luke Skywalker very well. With all of that being said, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Jedward, if Luke is so great, then why is he only at the middle of the list? Ah, dear viewer, enter the sequel trilogy. Bum bum bum. Rian Johnson came along and took the kind, noble, optimistic hero that we all knew and loved and turned him into a sad, broken man who hated his life and wanted to die. Remember in the original trilogy when Luke didn't give up on Darth Vader, the most evil man in the galaxy, and saw the good in him? Yeah, well, when Luke's nephew had a bad dream, he tried to kill him in his sleep, because that makes sense. And finally, Luke just straight up abandoned the galaxy when it needed him the most, going off to some random planet in the middle of bumfrick nowhere and just waiting for his heart to give out. So now, we reach the crux of the issue. While Luke from the original trilogy is a great character and an amazing Jedi, I can't stand Luke from the sequels. And as Mark Hamill himself put it, this is no longer Luke Skywalker. Instead, it's Jake Skywalker, a completely different character, and an awful Jedi. So all in all, Luke averages out to about the center of the list. Now we're entering the top 4 Jedi in all of Star Wars, and at the number 4 spot, much to learn you still have, oh that was an awful impression, it's Master Yoda. Yoda is by far one of the most popular Star Wars characters of all time, and whether you like Star Wars or not, you know who Yoda is. It's kind of hard to miss the small green goblin with the enormous ears who can also move gigantic objects with his mind and swing a lightsaber like nobody's business. On top of that, Yoda is an incredible teacher. I mean, he showed Luke how to become a Jedi on some random swamp planet in the middle of nowhere, and if you can teach someone there, you can teach them anywhere. Honestly, there's not even that much that I can say. I mean, everybody just knows how great of a Jedi Yoda is, and I don't really think that I need to explain why any further, but that does remind me, if you're enjoying so far, you really should hit that subscribe button. I mean, you watch my video every week, so you might as well just do it. Thank you, I really appreciate it. And now we move on to the top 3 Jedi in all of Star Wars. Now, if you can do elementary school math, which I'll admit still bamboozles me from time to time, no shame in that, then you've most likely realized that we're missing some pretty notable figures on this list so far. So it shouldn't be too surprising to learn that at the number 3 spot, we have Ahsoka Tano. When she was first introduced in the Clone Wars, she was pretty hated by Star Wars fans, and for good reason. She was very obnoxious and annoying. But Dave Filoni made a quick change of pace and turned her into one of the best characters in Star Wars. Wow, it's almost like people don't enjoy annoying, badly written characters, and a change of writing could be the cure. What a novel idea. Ahsoka's progression throughout the show is just all around amazing, with her eventually getting framed and then leaving the Jedi Order, which by the way is one of the saddest moments in Star Wars. Then she comes back in Rebels and has one of the best lightsaber duels in the entire saga with Darth Vader. Also, speaking of lightsabers, she's pretty unique, dual wielding two at the same time, although let me just say that the reverse grip is not the move, and there's literally no advantage to that whatsoever, but it sure looks cool, and it is a nice change of pace. Finally, let me just say that the new Ahsoka show is coming out later this year, and they better not mess it up. If they do, I'm going to be very angry, mark my words. We finally reached the top 2 Jedi in all of Star Wars. Now, it was very hard to choose between these characters, and they could really go either way, but at number 2, I placed the chosen one himself, Anakin Skywalker. I'll be honest, I haven't always loved every version of Anakin Skywalker ever, and I think that when he was 9, he was kind of annoying, but that's mainly because I've never seen a 9-year-old child actor actually be good at, acting. Although Jake Lloyd in no way deserved any of the hate that followed him, and showed that Star Wars fans can be really evil sometimes. I mean, they ruined this guy's life. However, peak Anakin was definitely in the Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Personally, in my opinion, I thought that he was slightly better in the Clone Wars, just because I think that it fleshed out his character a little more, and you could see his journey to the dark side a little more clearly. He was so close to being at the number 1 spot as the best Jedi in Star Wars, but I'm sorry, it takes a lot to beat the final character on this list, who is none other than the one and only Obi-Wan Kenobi. Everybody alive loves this character, and everything about him is great. From his devotion to the Jedi, to his quick wit, to his skill with a lightsaber. He is definitely one of the best characters from Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and if you want to know, I ranked every Sith in Star Wars from absolute worst to absolute best, and in this video, I'm going to go over all of them, starting with the least impressive Sith in Star Wars, who at the number 10 spot is no one other than Reva, from the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show. And I know that some of you might be in the comments right now saying things like, well, actually, Reva isn't a Sith, she's only an Inquisitor, and you know what? Fair enough. When I say Sith, I'm using it loosely, and I basically mean a dark side user, because even though a Sith isn't the same as someone who merely utilizes the dark side of the Force, there aren't actually that many true Sith in Star Wars cinema. Like, if I were to actually use the term Sith literally, then I couldn't even put Darth Maul on this list, because technically, his Sithhood was revoked, and there was no shot that I'm not putting Darth Maul on here. I mean, come on. So in this video, I'm basically going to be ranking every dark side user who's a major character in Star Wars, like Count Dooku, Savage Opress, and many more. I hope that makes sense, and now let me explain why Reva is at the number 10 spot on my list. The biggest reason for this is that for every single other Sith on this list, I can think of something good about them, just at least one thing that was done right. But for Reva, I simply can't think of anything. I mean, I guess Moses Ingram was a good actress, and she did portray Reva pretty well, but when it comes to the actual character in the show, she was just awful. For starters, the show tried to make her a character with a deep moral struggle, but in reality, it was just confusing. Like, she wants to get close to Vader to take revenge on him for what he did to her, so along the way, she becomes his most vicious lapdog, inflicting terrible evil on other innocent people in the name of the Empire. Then she fails to kill Darth Vader, but decides to go murder baby Luke Skywalker anyway because, yeah, that's about as much information as the show gives us. Throughout the entire series, Reva was just entirely uncompelling and, in my opinion, way too big of a part of a show that was supposed to be about Obi-Wan. By far the best thing she did in the entire Kenobi show was exemplify how bad donkey Darth Vader is, because in his duel with her, he beat her like a drum, and it was not even close. But all in all, in my opinion, by far the worst dark side user in Star Wars and thoroughly deserving of the number 10 spot. Up next at number 9 is the biggest letdown in maybe the entire franchise, and that was Supreme Leader Snoke. In The Force Awakens, I gotta admit, I had high hopes for Snoke. I really did. He was big and tall and scary, and he seemed so powerful. I truly thought that he would be the big bad villain for the sequel trilogy, and honestly, I was all for it. Fast forward to The Last Jedi, and Snoke is maybe a little smaller, a little less intimidating than I may have hoped, but that's okay. He's still so powerful. I mean, the way he zapped Kylo Ren like a bug and turned Rey into Raggedy Ann actually made him seem like a real threat. And then bam, out of nowhere, he collapsed like me after drinking a little too much of that chocolate milk. They always told me to take it easy on that stuff, and I should have listened. Just like that, the one thing that could have made the sequels a little better was gone. Now we were left with no big villain and no being powerful enough to pose an actual threat to Rey. What a letdown. You know what? Slow clap. Let's hear it for Rian Johnson. He really subverted our expectations. We appreciate you so much, Ryan. Anyway, with that out of the way, on to number 8. And number 8 is the one and only Savage Opress. Initially, Savage was a really cool character. I mean, that whole plot with him and his brother was really interesting. And then we had that whole plot of him betraying both Ventress and Dooku and going to find Darth Maul, which was sick. But unfortunately, after that, Savage just became Darth Maul 2.0. For the rest of the show, he just becomes a one-man army, which was cool in its own way, but he lost all the character development that he could have had along the way. A real shame, but I will admit that any duel he's in is so fun to watch, and especially that one on Mandalore with Savage and Maul against Palpatine. That was a great one, truly a classic. Anyway, I think that just about covers it, and now on to number 7, who is no one other than the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor is interesting because he was the only real villain for like one season of Rebels, and then he died, but I gotta say, he wasn't too bad. He was a little one-dimensional, and I can't stand his lightsaber, but he was really fun to watch in a lightsaber fight, and he was a good initial villain for Ezra and Kanan. However, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that he looked so bad in Kenobi, it wasn't even funny. Like, they didn't even try to enlarge his head, and they literally made his species before in live action. Why didn't they just do that again? Also, I remember watching him get stabbed by Reva in like the second episode of Kenobi, I think, and at the time, I was kind of shocked that he lived. But looking back, we've had, what, 5 people get stabbed through the gut with a lightsaber and walk away fine with like a day and a half of recovery? Way to go, guys. It really makes the most legendary weapon to ever exist in sci-fi feel so much more powerful. Ah, well, it's time to move on to number 6, and we're not done yet. It's Kylo Ren. But actually, that reminds me. Hello there, everybody. My name is Jedward, and I make tons of videos about Star Wars and other franchises like it. And if you're enjoying the video so far, I'd really appreciate it if you'd smash that subscribe button. Thank you, it would mean the world to me. And now, on to Kylo Ren. Alright, now I've heard a lot of people say that Kylo Ren was their favorite part of the sequels. And while I think that he had a lot of problems, mostly in his wishy-washy, indecisive character, I will admit that there were some things about him that I really liked. On the surface, he actually just looked so cool, and his helmet was really sick, especially when he made those fiery burns on it in The Rise of Skywalker. It really brought the whole thing together. Also, I actually think that his lightsaber is so epic. Like, the overall design is awesome, but the unstable blade makes it so much better. Like, so much better. Finally, Kylo Ren was a pretty cool, evil, intimidating villain back in The Force Awakens, and you could tell that he was supposed to be respected and powerful. But unfortunately, his whole character fell apart after that. The sequels had zero idea of what to do with him, so he became a wishy-washy character who did random things and whose entire arc as a character was confusing, hard to follow, and sometimes laughable. Like, I think him walking out of that wave in The Rise of Skywalker was supposed to be a cool boss moment, but with his hair plastered to his forehead and a face like he had just smelled a rancid fart, I busted out laughing when I first saw it. I can't even lie. The sad part is that Kylo had a real potential, and if the sequels weren't as botched as they were, he could have actually been good, but unfortunately, he doesn't even make the halfway mark on my list. However, since we did just make it to the middle of the list and we have 5 characters remaining, let me just say that this is where the Sith really get good, and everyone coming up is just straight up awesome. And at number 5, we have the hairless harpy herself, Asajj Ventress. Throughout the entire Clone Wars show, Ventress had a great arc. First as a simple assassin for Dooku, then onto a bounty hunter, and then, well, we don't really know what she did next. But who thinks that she's gonna show up in the Ahsoka show? I mean, as I write this script, episode 4 of that is dropping tonight, so maybe we'll see her return, which would be kinda sick, not gonna lie. Anyway, Ventress is also great in a fight, and she's so fun to watch duel with her 2 curved hilt red lightsabers, which I just straight up love. The one criticism that I really have is that Ventress is really not rocking the shaved head look, and I guess she and Doja Cat have that in common now, but I digress. And now on to number 4. Again, choosing between these last 4 was a real toughie, and they could have gone any way, I truly mean that. But at number 4, I have to put the man, the myth, the legend himself, Darth Maul. Now, when he was in The Phantom Menace, Maul had exactly one thing going for him, and that was his epic lightsaber duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. Other than that, he said like 30 words in the entire movie, and just kind of stood around when he was on screen. But the real magic of Darth Maul lies in the Clone Wars TV show. In the Clone Wars, Maul was a different level of beast, absolutely destroying anyone who got in his way, and just overachieving in every area possible. Just to put it in perspective, he went from freezing to death in the middle of space to the King of Mandalore in like 36 hours. And if that doesn't tell you how impressive he is, then nothing else really will. I'm sorry to break it to you. Also, he was done so well in the final season of Clone Wars during the Siege of Mandalore, when he knows that Palpatine is going to take over, and he just drops tiny hints to Ahsoka here and there throughout the series. Oh, and that duel with Ahsoka in the 3rd and final episode of season 7? Ooh, that was a masterpiece if I ever saw one. I mean, truly a chef's kiss. They actually motion captured the entire thing in real life and then animated it, so that it had the sense of weight and impact behind it that isn't in almost any other animated lightsaber duel. And finally, they gave him an absolutely beautiful ending in Rebels, with his lifelong enemy holding him in his arms. Anyway, entering the top 3 now, we have the smartest man in the galaxy, the man who was solely responsible for turning the Republic into the Empire over the course of decades. And that man, of course, was Darth Sidious. Now, I don't know you, and I don't know anything about you, but if you're like me, and you probably are if you're watching this video, you're probably thinking to yourself, Jedward, you resilient rapscallion, the number 3 spot is pretty good, but don't you think that the Darth Sidious deserves a little higher? Maybe number 2, or even number 1 on a good day. And the answer to that question, my wonderfully curious viewer who I know is subscribed, is that Sidious would have been higher if and only if the Star Wars sequels hadn't existed. Because I'm sure you're aware that in The Rise of Skywalker, Darth Sidious was brought back and butchered in perhaps the most foolish move ever performed by Disney, which is saying something, believe me. So because of that, he averages out to number 3. However, the reason he is still so high on the list despite his sequel appearance is because of how simply phenomenal he was in the first 6 Star Wars movies. He was incredibly powerful, popping off in every duel that he was a part of, and almost never losing any physical confrontation. He was so deviously smart, which you can tell based on how he literally toppled a republic that had been standing for thousands of years, and right under the very noses of the Jedi. And finally, he was just pure evil, which was exactly what he needed as a character. I mean, it was so nice that we as an audience weren't spoon-fed some sob story about how he was traumatized as a kid, and how he was bullied, and how he was trying to make the galaxy better under his rule. None of that. He is evil through and through. He will do anything for power, he will betray and kill anyone who stands in his way, and he will let nothing and no one stop him whatsoever. Just pure evil. You gotta love him, except for when he came back in the sequels, but the less said about that the better. Anyway, now we're moving on into the top 2, and you probably know who these next 2 are, so the only question is what order are they in? And the answer to that is that at the number 2 spot, we have Darth Tyrannus, otherwise known as Count Dooku. And if you've ever watched a Jared video before, then you know that I simply love this man, and I'm really seriously considering making a full video explaining why I think he's so great, so let me know if you'd watch that. But the reason that he's at the number 2 spot is for a couple different reasons. First of all, the only reason that Dooku became a Sith in the first place is because number 1, he was angry at the direction that the Jedi Order was going in, and he wanted no part of it, and number 2, because as a scholar, he wanted a deeper understanding of the Force. And let's just say that he got that deeper understanding. He was immensely powerful, and he was one of the few Sith who knew how to utilize Force lightning, along with many other impressive skills and abilities. And as for the lightsaber combat, buddy, don't even get me started on that. First of all, his lightsaber itself is the singular best lightsaber in Star Wars, and I think that the curved hilt is just so cool and classy. Second, Dooku as a swordsman is just so impressive with it, and he's so elegant and classy, and I love watching any duel that he's a part of. What a legend. And with that being said, we're moving on to the number 1 spot on this list. I'm sure all of you watching knew exactly who it was going to be when you clicked on this video, and you weren't wrong. You know him, you love him, and coming in with his own unique, awesome theme, you don't know the power of the dark side. It's Darth Vader. Literally everyone alive loves this man, and he is a staple for the Star Wars franchise as a whole. With his deep story, epic appearance, and sick lightsaber duels, he's incredible to watch. He's so powerful. I found the top 10 coolest bounty hunters in Star Wars, and in this video, I'm going to rank them all from absolute worst to absolute best. And at number 10, as the worst bounty hunter on this list, I put my boy Greedo. As far as I know, Greedo has only ever made one appearance in Star Wars cinema, and that was his classic scene in Episode 4, A New Hope. Basically, Greedo confronts Han Solo, looking to collect on a bounty and deliver Han to Jabba the Hutt. Naturally, Han doesn't like that, so they get into a little gunfight, and let's just say that Greedo bites the dust. Now, this does spark the age-old question of who shot first, Han or Greedo? I've seen a lot of arguments about this online, but the final answer is that Greedo actually shot first. Anyway, the main reason that I put this funky looking Rodian way down here at number 10 is because, as far as I can tell, he sucks at his job. I mean, he literally tracks down, captures, and kills people for a living, and he couldn't even take on one mere smuggler. What a loser. Anyway, with that out of the way, we're gonna shapeshift our way onto number 9, and I say shapeshift because the number 9 spot is Zam Wessel. Now, Zam is funny because, like Greedo, she also seems to be bad at her job. The reason I say that is because do you know how freaking easy it would have been to kill Padme? I mean, actually, you know exactly where she is, you know exactly how to get to her, and you think to yourself, yeah, I should use some bugs, just some big old bugs with a couple hundred legs. So that was dumb. And then on top of that, there is no reason that she should have gotten caught. I mean, realistically, if she had just been a few hundred miles away, then Anakin and Obi-Wan would have never linked it back to her. I mean, how would they have? And then finally, the funniest thing about Zam to me is that she even got hired in the first place. I saw some YouTube short about this, and it kind of explains it better than I could, so I'll just play that.
So Palpatine needs Padme dead, but he doesn't want to do it himself, so he asks Count Dooku to go kill Padme. But Count Dooku doesn't want to do it himself, so Count Dooku asks Jango Fett to go kill Padme. But Jango Fett doesn't want to do it himself, so he asks his shapeshifter friend to go kill Padme. But the shapeshifter sends a robot to go kill Padme. And if you really want to be an asshole and get even more granular, the droid says, I'll send these little bugs to go kill Padme.
I think that just about explains it, and that, holy cow, that video got 15 million views? Man, I am making the wrong kind of content here. But I like you guys too much to stop. You always bring a smile on my face, so thank you. Regardless, you may be asking yourself, Jedward, given Zam's incredible lack of skill at bounty hunting, why is she above Greedo on this list? And quite frankly, the answer is that I think Zam's shapeshifting ability is cool. I mean, it gives her some brownie points in my book. I just kind of like it. It's not the greatest argument in the world, but hey, I gotta rank these guys somehow. Anyway, up next to number 8, we have Embo. And I know that there's this one guy in my comment section who absolutely loves Embo. I mean, just adores him. So sorry to break it to you, buddy, but I am putting him at the number 8 spot. If it's any comfort, the reason that I put him here isn't because he's a bad character or a bad bounty hunter. It's simply because every other bounty hunter on this list is just a little bit better, just a little. Again, that's not to say that Embo is bad at all, because he's not. I love his shield hat, and I think he has the record for the sickest spin kick in Star Wars. He jumps like 20 feet in the air, spins counterclockwise, and just decks this chump right here. Hats off to you, champ, and in Embo's case, I mean that literally. Moving on to number 7, we have Fennec Shand, who honestly is kind of an underrated bounty hunter in my opinion. I mean, she has some cool skills and abilities, and she is definitely good in a fight, and honestly, I kind of vibe with her character design. The colors are a nice contrast, and her helmet's not bad either, with that slit in the middle. Also, it doesn't really hurt that Ming-Na Wen is pretty easy on the eyes, although unfortunately, in the show, she is just completely overshadowed by that one Gamorrean guard. I mean, who could ever hope to look better than that guy? It's a losing battle. But jokes aside, Fennec was a solid character, with an interesting story, and again, when someone who's supposed to be a random sidekick to the main character is actually more interesting and more impressive than the main character himself, you know that you've messed up. Anyway, now we're heading closer to the middle of the list, and approaching the number 6 spot, we have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Boba Fett. I know that you might be surprised I'm ranking him this low, given that he's one of the most infamous characters in all of Star Wars. And believe me, it's with a very heavy heart that I do so. My entire childhood, I always thought that Boba Fett was so cool. I mean, I know he didn't really do that much in the originals, but something about him was just so appealing to me as a kid. And apparently, it was to thousands of other people too, because we all know how popular he was. Then I watched the Clone Wars, and I got to see his story unfold even more, from a young kid to a teenager. And again, I walked away liking him more than I had before. So when Disney announced that there would be a show called The Book of Boba Fett about Boba Fett, I remember being so excited. The first episode dropped, and me and my dad both sat down to watch it together. And I just recall that as the show went on, we both realized that this was not the Boba Fett that he'd grown up with in the 80s and that I'd come to know in the 2010s. This character was wishy-washy, weak, pathetic, and like I said earlier, completely overshadowed by a ton of other characters in the show. And also, we all know in the back of our minds how easy it would have been to make a really good Boba Fett show. Like, this should have been a slam dunk for Disney. But no, they just had to completely change his character and make him a nice guy. It honestly really does make me sad, because now I have to put him literally above the middle of the list, when in reality, he should be sitting somewhere in the top 3. An actual shame. But you know what they say, no point crying over spilled milk, unless it's this milk, in which case you'll catch me sobbing till the cows come home, believe that. Regardless, on to the middle of the list, and coming in at number 5, we have the legendary Aurra Sing. But speaking of pale, mostly bald ladies with a giant stick up their head, that reminds me. Hello there everybody, my name is Jedward, and I make tons of videos about Star Wars and other franchises like it. And if you're enjoying this video so far, it would mean the world to me if you'd hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. Now, Aurra Sing is, in my opinion, one of the coolest bounty hunters in the Clone Wars, and I kind of love how they took a character who appeared for maybe 2 seconds in the Phantom Menace and thought, you know what, let's make her the most sociopathic bounty hunter that the world has ever seen, and then they made her a heartless monster. But as far as bounty hunting goes, she's pretty epic. She's ruthlessly efficient, incredibly skilled in most forms of combat, whether that be flying, shooting, or hand-to-hand, and like I said previously, she has no soul. There's not even that much more that I can say. Overall, I just thought that she was a really good bounty hunter, and I enjoyed watching the episode she was in. Now, this is the part of the list where we start getting to some actually good bounty hunters, like some actual legends in the field. And speaking of legends, did anyone call Dr. Kurt Connors? Because I think he's next up on the list. Oh wait, no, it's just Bosk, the Wookiee's worst nightmare. Like any intelligent human being, I freaking love Bosk. I think that he's so cool, and he's an all-around epic character to me. His entire persona of a primal hunter who will do anything to catch his prey just struck home with me. And I think that he's one of the few people in the world that you can actually describe with the adjective savage. Also, my love for him goes back to my Star Wars Battlefront days, when you could buy the extension pack and get Bosk as a villain. All I remember is putting on that thermal vision and running around the map like a wounded animal, looking for rebels to shred. Ah, core memories of childhood. In the Clone Wars, Bosk was a master with a lot of different weapons, including his trademark mortar blaster, but he really shone through in unarmed combat. Don't ask me why, but for some reason, the 7-foot-tall lizard species has incredible strength and is a real threat. In fact, word on the street is that Bosk's physical strength is second to no one but the infamous Micah Soda, who's commonly regarded as one of the strongest men alive, and also, coincidentally, the first ever person to become a member on my YouTube channel, which any of you can do too if you're looking to support me as a creator and get yourself some special privileges while you're at it. If you're interested, just click on the join button right under this video. Alright, thank you so much, and with that, let's move on to number 3, who's the infamous Jango Fett. What's so great about Jango Fett is that he has so many gadgets that we actually get to see him use. He's got Beskar armor, a surface-to-air missile on his back, serrated blades in his gauntlets, a flamethrower on his wrist, a grappling wire on his forearm, and that's just scratching the surface of what we get to see. On top of that, he's a legendary warrior, and there's a reason they chose him to be the template for all of the other clones. And of course, how could anyone forget that he was the original owner of the one and only Slave One, which is probably my all-time favorite ship in all of Star Wars. I think it's so cool. I absolutely love it. Regardless, Jango is in the spot where Boba should have been, but because Disney actually left Jango alone instead of messing with him like they did with Boba, it pains me to say that I have to put Jango higher up on this list than Boba. But again, what's done is done, nothing we can do about it, and let's get into the top 2 bounty hunters, and these ones are both absolute legends. So I'm very excited to say that as the second coolest bounty hunter in Star Wars, we have the Mandalorian, or maybe I should be more specific, because we have a lot of Mandalorians, so I'm talking about Din Djarin. Now, to be fair, Din Djarin wasn't a bounty hunter for too long, and he doesn't hunt bounties anymore, but in season 1 of The Mandalorian, I think it's safe to say that he captured all of our hearts, and there's a reason that when it released, it was so popular right out of the gate. I mean, literally, that one throwaway line in episode 1 gave me chills when I first heard it. Here, take a listen.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
What a boss moment, and I really don't think that I have to explain much further what makes The Mandalorian so great. Truly a legend. And speaking of legends, we've just arrived at the number 1 spot on our list. If you like Star Wars, and I'm sure you do if you're watching this video, then I'm guessing you know and love this guy, and swaggering his way in with a dope hat and the coolest voice in the galaxy, it's the man who needs no introduction, Cad Bane. Cad Bane is a bounty hunting legend, and throughout the entire Clone Wars, he usually got hired out by various Sith, usually Dooku, but sometimes Sidious himself, to do a job that nobody else was fit for. That's how skilled he was. And I found the 25 coolest lightsaber duels in Star Wars, and in this video, I'm going to rank them all, from absolute worst to absolute best. Now, be warned, this list does have some hot takes, and I think that my top 3 duels in particular might be a little controversial, so stick around for that. But without further ado, let's get into it. And starting with the absolute worst lightsaber duel in Star Wars, we have Rey versus Kylo Ren from The Rise of Skywalker. The thing about this that pisses me off the most is the total, for lack of a better word, bastardization of the lightsabers. This tends to be a recurring problem for Disney as a whole, but in recent years, lightsabers have lost all of their mystique and subtleties. Instead, they've basically become your average baseball bat, and nowhere is this more obvious than in Rey vs. Kylo Ren's duel on the ruins of the second Death Star. Forgotten are the days of elegant choreography and pure skill and discipline on the part of the actors. Instead, it looks like they've been sat down and told by J.J. Abrams, "Alright guys, whenever you're ready, just start swinging," and then let loose. In my opinion, the absolute worst part of this duel is the concept of stopping a lightsaber with the Force. It just seems lazy and sloppy and totally lacks effort in any way whatsoever, along with showing no desire to make the duel actually cool and interesting to watch, which I guess when you get down to it are really good adjectives to sum up the entirety of this duel. Anyway, moving on, we have yet again another sequel duel. Wow, how shocking, with Luke Skywalker versus Kylo Ren. I mean, it is The Last Jedi, so obviously they don't know how to do Luke well, but I think having him do this kind of force projection thing across the entire galaxy and then do kind of a phantom duel with Kylo Ren is one of the biggest wastes of potential I've ever seen. In my opinion, it would have been such a better choice to have Luke actually go to Crate and hold off Kylo Ren there, along with, I don't know, maybe having an actual duel with him. I will say though, I did think it was kind of sick when Luke pulled off this ninja spin move right here. That was one of the cooler moments by far. Regardless, not much more that I can say, just kind of a sad end for Luke Skywalker in my opinion, and he is in some way better duels later on in this video, so I'm looking forward to getting to those. But now, let's keep going. And up next, at number 23, is a duel not from the sequels, but still made by Disney. And that of course is Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader, their first confrontation from the Kenobi TV show. Now look, I know that there are a lot of people out there who would say that this duel is better than the duel from A New Hope, and I understand that argument, I really do. But to me personally, the entire Obi-Wan Kenobi show was so poorly done and left such a bad taste in my mouth, and this duel directly contributed to that. First of all, it takes place in some big construction site in the middle of the night, so the entire fight basically consists of them running around in the dark for like 15 minutes. Second, the actual choreography was just awful in my opinion, and I thought that neither of the characters were at the skill levels that they should have been, especially not Obi-Wan. Like I said, I've seen a lot of people defend this duel, and if you like it, then good for you, but frankly, I was incredibly disappointed. However, I know that just a minute ago, I mentioned the original Vader v Obi-Wan SmackDown from A New Hope, and how convenient, because that's exactly what's coming up next. Obviously, the biggest flaw in this duel was the absolutely awful choreography. I mean, looking back on it, this did not age well. Both of the characters move about as fast as I do, after downing an entire bottle of chocolate milk in 37 seconds flat. Hey, it's hard work, but if Sam Sula can do it, then so can I. I'm getting off topic, but what I'm saying is that both of these characters in this duel are moving very slow. I think that this fight is a little nostalgic to a lot of people, because for most of us, it was one of the first duels that we ever saw. But I'm trying not to let that impact my decision, and I'm gonna have to leave it right here at the 22nd spot. Although it can be noted that this and the 23rd spot, you know, Vader versus Kenobi from the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show, could be interchanged with each other pretty easily. They're both not very good in my opinion. Coming up right after 22 is obviously 21, which is actually the most recent duel in Star Wars as far as I know, and that was Ahsoka Tano versus Morgan Elsbeth. I will give it to them, one thing I liked about this duel was Morgan Elsbeth's glowing green sword. I'm sure the comments will know the official Wikipedia name, but I don't, so glowing green sword I guess. But other than that, there aren't really that many things about this duel that I liked. I guess the environment is kind of cool on top of that huge stone tower, but the choreography was very in line with the rest of Disney's fight scenes. That is to say, slow, boring, and uninteresting to watch. For the life of me, I don't understand why they don't bring back the choreography from the prequels. I mean, it is Disney, they've got unlimited money, they can hire anyone they want to in the world, and they know that this is what the fans love. Plus, lore-wise, it would make sense, because Ahsoka was actually trained in the time when they had cool choreography. See, put me in charge of Disney, I would help them out more than they deserve. But regardless, let's move on, and coming up next is Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Count Dooku, the duel from Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you know, if you've watched this channel before, I freaking love Count Dooku, and it hurts my soul putting him here. But the fact is that this lightsaber duel just wasn't that good. First of all, it was really short, and then, to make it worse, it was divided into like 3 sub-duels. It started with Anakin getting zapped in the first 3 seconds, then Dooku crushed Obi-Wan, and then Anakin came back for seconds and got smoked again. Each of those sub-duels were a little short, and the choreography wasn't great in any of them. There's one part of Dooku and Anakin's second face-off where the camera zooms in on their faces, and all you can see is the colored light flashing. I don't know what they were going for, but it does not look good. Busting into the tents for the first time, we have Vader versus Kenobi, their second duel from the Kenobi TV show. At number 19. Don't get me wrong, this duel was light years better than the first one, by a long shot. But again, the setting was just such a waste. They were fighting in a big open rocky desert place, at night of course, and they just kind of went back and forth for like 20 minutes. Plus, when you're actually watching it, you get the sense that the creators of the show wanted Vader to win, but then in the last 2 minutes they remembered that, oh wait, Obi-Wan has to win. So the result is that Vader goes from completely smoking Obi-Wan like Gandalf's pipe to getting rocks hurled at him, having his mask cut open, and being stranded on whatever weird planet this was. Look, there are definitely worse duels, and this one has some cool moments, but personally, I just think that all the duels coming up in this video are a little bit better, just a smidge. Up next at number 18 is kind of a random one, and I'll bet that most of you don't really remember it too well. And that of course is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Asajj Ventress versus Darth Maul and Savage Opress. The main reason that I'm including this out-of-pocket duel on this list is because of how unique it was. I mean, think about it. First of all, Ventress and Obi-Wan teamed up, which is weird enough on its own, but then Ventress gave Obi-Wan one of her lightsabers, and I'm gonna be honest, it was kind of sick to see the legend himself fighting with a curved hilt. But on top of that, the teamwork aspect between Obi-Wan and Ventress was really cool. They worked together pretty well. I don't know, it's not a very important fight, which is why it's not that high on the list, but it is kind of a diamond in the rough, so I'll leave it right here at the number 18 spot. Moving on to numero 17, we have another one of the most recent duels in Star Wars, and that was Ahsoka Tano versus imagination funky mentally created Anakin Skywalker. I gotta be honest, deep down, I'm most likely being really heavily influenced by nostalgia. I mean, seeing Hayden Christensen again was cool, and man, that guy can still swing a lightsaber, holy cow. In a time where everyone fights so slowly and clunkily, it was so nice to see Anakin actually just pop off, and honestly, probably having to hold back a little bit, if we're being real. He's like 40 years old at this point, and it still looks like he's slowing down so that Rosario Dawson can keep up. But as for the actual duel, this was definitely one of the better ones in the show, and while it was still far short of the golden days of the prequels, it was the closest thing that we've gotten in a long time. So for right now, I'm gonna put it here at the number 17 spot. Rebelling our way into number 16, see what I did there? We have Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger versus the Grand Inquisitor. I gotta be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the Grand Inquisitor. I think he looks kinda cool, but I can't stand his stupid spinning lightsaber. And I don't know, something about the way he holds himself just feels weird to me. Regardless, this duel at the end of season 1 of Rebels isn't bad. It's not great either by any stretch whatsoever, but there are some interesting things it does here. By far the coolest part was when Kanan and the Grand Inquisitor had their face off, and Kanan started incorporating Ezra's blaster lightsaber. Man, that thing was so underutilized. Also, the GI had that sick line at the very end of the fight, so here, take a listen.
There are some things far more frightening than death.
Some things are worse than death, you say. I wonder who he could be possibly talking about. Regardless, let's move on to another animated show, and like you said, only the strongest shall rule. That's right, it's Darth Maul versus Pre Vizsla from the Clone Wars. Obviously, it's always a treat to watch Maul in a lightsaber duel, and what made this even better is that he actually played fair and didn't use the Force at all. However, surprisingly enough, one of the best parts of this fight is how easily Pre Vizsla was able to hold his own. I mean, honestly, I was kind of impressed. Finally, Pre Vizsla also had some sick final words, but you probably don't want to hear them. I mean, you just heard the Grand Inquisitors, and who am I kidding? Of course you do. Here you go.
Like you said, only the strongest shall rule.
Meeting his end like a warrior, with honor and dignity. Now that's a Mandalorian. Up next, at number 14, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi versus General Grievous. By far, the best part of this duel is when General Kenobi utters those sacred words. How do they go again? Oh, right, I think it's hello there, everybody. My name is Jedward, and I make tons of videos about Star Wars and other franchises like it. And if you're enjoying this video so far, then do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. And also, this is the first time that I've ever said this in a video, but if you could follow me on Twitter, it would mean the world to me. The link is in the top comment of this video, and it would really help me out. Again, thank you all so much. And now let's talk about Obi-Wan versus Grievous. In my opinion, the pride and joy of this duel is how well they were able to create Grievous in live action. I mean, it really does look phenomenal. Another cool feature is how the scenery keeps changing, from the initial platform to the epic chase to the final landing area. However, one of the issues with this duel is that Grievous doesn't really use his 4 lightsabers for very long, which was one of the big things that made this duel unique in the first place. It's most likely due to the fact that it must have been a nightmare to choreograph, which is fair enough, but regardless, I would have liked to see him use some more arms for longer than he did. Making our way to the only sequel duel that was actually somewhat good, we have Kylo Ren versus Finn and Rey at the number 13 spot. Now, it's time for me to come clean about something. In the past, I might have been a little harsher on this duel than it deserved, solely because I felt like I needed to hate it because it was from the sequels. Since then, I've been able to mature a little bit and look at this duel from an unbiased lens, and yeah, it's not too bad. Don't get me wrong though, this movie and the sequels still suck, but regardless, the scenery is really cool in the dark woods at night, and honestly, the fight probably has the best choreography in the entire sequel trilogy. Sure, maybe Rey was a little better with a lightsaber than she should have been, seeing as this was her first time ever holding one, but it wasn't that big of an issue, and she and Kylo Ren both had some good moments, so it felt fairly evenly matched. However, when Rey absolutely bonked Kylo Ren in the face with her lightsaber, it did piss me off that all it did was leave a little scratch. Classic Disney, I know, but it really should have taken off his head. Anyway, I did enjoy this duel when I saw it, and I think that the 13th spot is a good place for it. Coming in at number 12, it's treason then. That's right, we have Mace Windu versus Darth Sidious. Listen, I think this fight is pretty good. Plus, it's one of the only times we actually see Mace Windu in a lightsaber duel, so you kinda gotta love it when you look at it like that. However, I do think that the choreography could have been a little better, and it's no surprise that everybody's favorite part is at the end, when Sidious surrenders and Anakin comes running in and all that jazz goes down. One thing that I did think was really stupid though was how fast Sidious managed to kill the 3 other Jedi Masters. I know that I'm gonna get a buttload of comments saying, oh, he used a Force scream and paralyzed the Jedi Masters, but come on man. If we, as fans, are going to criticize the sequels for their lack of consistency and overuse of plot convenience, then we gotta be willing to call out the good stuff too. Palpatine's triple kill over here is clearly just lazy writing, and deep down, we all know that. One of the saddest parts though is that there was an opportunity to have one of the most legendary lightsaber duels in Star Wars. Imagine this, a fight where Sidious single-handedly takes on 4 Jedi Masters at once and slowly picks them off one by one. Now that would have been epic. Don't get me wrong though, this fight is still pretty sick, and lately I've come to appreciate it more than I used to. Let's move on, and jumping over to number 11, it's Ahsoka versus Darth Maul from season 7 of the Clone Wars. Now, I guarantee that none of you are going to be able to guess what I'm going to say next. Glenn Quagmire. I know darn well you weren't expecting that. No, but seriously, what I was actually going to say next is that my favorite thing about this duel was that it was actually motion captured in real life. So even though it's animated, it actually seems kind of realistic, and you can feel the weight behind each hit. It also makes the choreography that much more impressive, because the actors had to do it all in real life. But one of the more underrated aspects of this duel is the scenery. I mean, the Mandalorian throne room is a great place for a fight, and then when they're on the metal beams thousands of feet above the city, now that's what I call tension. Finally, Maul's constant teasing and taunting of Ahsoka with what he knows and she doesn't adds a whole nother layer of stakes and depth to this duel. Truly one of the better things that Disney has made. At long last, we've reached the top 10, and from here on out, these lightsaber duels are the best of the best. The chef's kiss of Star Wars, if you will. And what better way to start it off than with Master Yoda versus Count Dooku. This duel is one of my personal favorites. Well, I guess this whole list is my personal favorites, but given my love of Count Dooku, there's a special place in my heart for this one. First of all, both of these characters are just a pleasure to watch in a fight. Yoda's got those crazy acrobatics cinematics that we all know and love, Dooku has his usual sleek, elegant style of combat. I gotta admit, although Attack of the Clones doesn't have great CGI, Yoda actually looks really good, and I can totally buy that he's a real physical character. My only complaint with this duel is that it's pretty short, but the only reason for that was because Yoda and Dooku had a force-off for like 5 minutes before any lightsabers got pulled. So yeah, solid duel, and it works really well at the number 10 spot. Coming up next at number 9, we have the infamous Darth Sidious versus Savage Opress and Darth Maul duel. I'm not gonna lie, even though it's animated, it is one of the most visually pleasing lightsaber fights that I've ever seen in my entire life. Darth Maul and Savage Opress are cool, but they are nothing compared to Darth Sidious. That guy goes off like nobody's business. From the moment he pulls out his lightsabers, he just becomes a blur of red streaks, followed by flips, dodges, and blocks. Sidious holds off both of these guys with ease and defeats them both with minimal effort. Heck, even when he simply walks in the building, it's sick, with the guards choking 20 feet in the air and Sidious barely holding a hand up. Honestly, not much more that I can say. I think that we were all kind of blown away with this duel when we first saw it, and it is an absolute masterpiece. The second to last duel from Rebels on this list happens to be at number 8, and it's the final showdown between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Maul. What's funny is that this duel is so short, only lasting about 5 seconds total, and yet it's so meaningful and impactful to people who really know what they're watching. First of all, Obi-Wan baits Maul into attacking foolishly by assuming Qui-Gon's stance, and then when Maul does attack, Obi-Wan cuts him down like wheat in a field. Second, let's all just take a minute to think about how remarkable it is that Obi-Wan held Maul in his arms as he was dying. I mean, this guy just terrorized Obi-Wan for his entire life, and yet Obi-Wan comforted him and gave him a peaceful ending. That takes true moral character, and to be honest, I'm not sure I could have done it. But yeah, what makes this duel so incredible is obviously not the choreography, although it's not bad, but instead the emotional tension that comes with it, and the feeling of finality that it brings to the journey of these two characters. I can't put it any higher on this list because, as I said, there's like 5 seconds of actual fighting, but this scene always moves me in a way that very few others can. Up next, at number 7, it's Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader from Empire Strikes Back. This duel is a cinematic classic and truly one of the most fondly remembered duels in Star Wars. It has a few things going for it, including the intense emotional conflict between Vader and Luke, along with a fairly decent choreography for the time. This fight also has some of the best scenery of any duel, with long dark hallways, big steamy rooms, and walkways over enormous drops. Also, can we just appreciate that Vader was literally seconds away from freezing Luke Skywalker in carbonite while he was dueling him at the same time? Now that's crazy impressive. At number 6, with a signature look of superiority, it's Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Count Dooku from Revenge of the Sith. Look, you simply can't argue with the fact that this is one of the best choreographed duels in the entire prequel trilogy. All 3 actors played their roles to perfection, and then obviously Count Dooku kinda pops off, taking on both Anakin and Obi-Wan at the same time. Unfortunately, Anakin suddenly realizes that he's a big boy now, and gives Dooku a nice little head surgery, showing the inner darkness inside of him and helping to pave the way to what we all know he will become. Honestly, I don't even know what to say. This duel just rocks, and it works great at the number 6 spot. Alright, we are now entering the top 5 duels in Star Wars, and at number 5 itself, you knew it was coming. It was Yoda versus Darth Sidious. I freaking love this duel. I think that it is far and away the best lightsaber fight for both of these characters, with neither of them holding back whatsoever. Honestly though, one of the coolest scenes of this entire fight to me is when Yoda walks into the room and without even looking, waves his hand. Instantly, these 2 Imperial guards just hit the wall like a ton of bricks. Now that is a boss move if I've ever seen one. Finally, this whole fight just looks phenomenal. I mean, literally all of it. Yoda looks good, the Force lightning looks good, even the part where Sidious starts chucking Senate pods looks good. Although if I had to make one comment, I'd say that Yoda should probably work on his grip strength, because as of right now, he's looking a little weak. But yeah, great duel and totally deserving of the number 5 spot. At number 4, I am a Jedi, like my father before me. It's Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader from Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. I think that it might be a little socially unpopular to put this duel above the Cloud City one, but to me, it's not even a contest. First of all, on the most basic level, the tension in this scene is so high. Will Luke give in to the dark side and replace Vader, or will he stay strong and resist the power? Obviously, we know what he chose, but the fight was set up so well in that regard. Also, this duel has far and away some of the best moves in the entire original trilogy. I mean, Luke kicks Vader down a flight of stairs, Vader throws his freaking lightsaber. There was so much cool stuff happening. Finally, Vader fulfilled the prophecy and became the chosen one by throwing Sidious down the reactor shaft and bringing balance to the Force. At least that used to be the explanation until the sequels went in another direction, let's just say that. I'm not gonna get hung up on that though, because we've officially entered the top 3. And be sure to go subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much. Now, at number 3, we have the legendary Duel of the Fates with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Darth Maul on Naboo. It should come as a surprise to no one that I put this lightsaber fight here. Literally everyone loves it and the music is iconic. Yeah, enough of that. You get the picture. The one thing that makes this duel such a staple is the choreography. These actors worked harder on it than a pitbull named Cupcake who got let loose in a kindergarten, and it really shows. I think my favorite part of the entire fight though is when Obi-Wan and Darth Maul are having their little one-on-one and they are just popping off. In this scene, Ewan McGregor and Ray Park were actually moving too fast, and they literally had to slow down the camera in post-production to make it look good. Where did this stuff go, man? People used to care about things like this, and now all they do is spoon feed us boring fights that look like garbage. It really makes me sad. But if you want to talk about things that are sad, then you're in luck, because at number 2, we have Ahsoka Tano versus Darth Vader. In the past, this duel used to be number 1 for me, and recently I've changed that opinion, but this duel is still a masterpiece. Personally, I'm a huge Clone Wars fan, so Ahsoka has always been one of my favorite characters, and that's what makes this duel so emotional for me. We see Ahsoka confronting her old master in a head-to-head confrontation in a Sith temple with all the knowledge of who he is and what he's become. It gets even sadder when Ahsoka cuts open Vader's helmet and reveals Anakin inside. From start to finish, this lightsaber duel is a work of art. I mean, even the fighting styles of the two characters are done masterfully. Vader has his trademark swift and powerful strokes, while Ahsoka leaps and darts around with graceful swings and masterful use of twin blades. Honestly, this duel was a serious contender for the number 1 spot, and it took me a while to figure out where I should put it. But in the end, it just couldn't beat the best lightsaber duel in Star Wars. Come on, you knew what it was before you clicked on this video. At the number 1 spot, as the greatest lightsaber duel ever, you know it, you love it, it's Obi-Wan versus Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. This duel has the best of both worlds with insane emotional tension and incredible choreography. The epic showdown between the two best Jedi will move anyone. And speaking of Jedi, I found the top 10 teachers in all of Star Wars, and in this video, I'm going to rank them all from the absolute best to the absolute worst. So without further ado, let's get into it. At number 10, as the absolute best mentor in all of Star Wars is Count Dooku. Now, whoa, don't click off yet. I understand that that's probably not what you expected to hear, but just give me a chance to explain. The way that I'm going to be making this list is by deciding how much I'd want each individual character to be my mentor. And when I line up every mentor in Star Wars, there is literally no one else who will teach me both the light and the dark side of the Force. As a former Jedi and now a Sith, Dooku is literally the only character on this list who will teach me both sides of the equation. And unlike someone like Sidious or Yoda who may have a knowledge of both sides of the Force but will only teach me one, Dooku will show me the best of both worlds. Dooku has exclusively learned from the best of the best, being a direct Padawan of Yoda when he was a Jedi and being a direct Padawan of Sidious when he became a Sith. And unlike Sidious, Dooku is not pure evil. He's simply a man who saw the corruption in the Jedi Order and wanted no part of it. On top of everything, I know that if I was trained by Dooku, I would become an absolute menace with a lightsaber. Count Dooku is one of the most skilled swordsmen in all the galaxy, and he would take great care to ensure that I could take on anyone in a duel. And plus, on a personal level, since your boy loves a nice curved hilt, Dooku is the perfect person to show me how to effectively wield one. And lastly, unlike most of the Sith in Star Wars, I don't believe that Dooku would turn on me, as long as I didn't provoke him first. And hold on, I know what you're thinking. Jebber, you swashbuckling scoundrel, you're forgetting that during the Clone Wars, Count Dooku betrayed Ventress. Yes, I do remember that, but that was only because Sidious forced him to, and don't worry, I'll talk about Sidious later. Dooku only ordered Ventress to be thrown away because, at the time, his relationship with Sidious was more important to him than his relationship with Ventress. When I say I want Dooku as a teacher, I mean in a perfect world, and without Sidious's interference. I don't believe that on his own, Dooku would have tried to kill Ventress, because he genuinely seemed to take pride in her and her skill. I don't know, I could be wrong, but that's what I think. All in all, I strongly believe that Count Dooku would be the best mentor in the galaxy. And by the way, let me mention really quickly that to qualify for this list, you have to be a major character who has mentored at least one other major character. And believe me, some of the mentors coming up on this list get pretty awful, so stick around for that. Alright, time to move on. Up next at second best is obviously Master Yoda. What can I say? This guy has got 900 years of teaching under his belt, so he better know a thing or two, and he's kind of a jack of all trades. Everybody already knows all of Yoda's famous quotes, you know, do or do not, there is no try, size matters not, which, yikes, I really hope is true, and obviously, who could forget?
It's about drive, it's about power. Zoa 30% off on Amazon for the next few hours.
Truly some timeless classics. That's one thing that would be great about getting trained by Yoda. You don't just learn skills and abilities, you also learn lessons and wisdom too. But then there are the skills and abilities, which Yoda is absolutely insane at. I mean, I want to learn how to catch Force Lightning and do whatever this is. Those are two full-grown men, and all he did was wave his hand. That's crazy. As for lightsaber fighting, there's no question whatsoever that this guy knows what he's doing. I mean, just look at those acrobatics. There's not even that much that I can say, because everybody just already knows how cool it would be to be trained by Yoda. Coming in at the number 8 spot is Qui-Gon Jinn, and here's why Qui-Gon Jinn would be an awesome mentor. He would teach you to never trust authority. When Qui-Gon Jinn was alive, he was constantly suspicious of the Jedi Council, and he started to see the politics that the Jedi were getting mixed up in before anyone else even could. Now, granted, he did learn this from Count Dooku, who was his master, but he did try to pass this on to Obi-Wan, who unfortunately never really understood the mistrust that Qui-Gon had until it was too late. And this is not a controversial take at all. Basically, every Star Wars fan likes Qui-Gon, and unless I'm just dead wrong, I'm pretty sure that he's Star Wars Theory's favorite Jedi. As for teaching me how to use the Force and a lightsaber, Qui-Gon would be alright, I guess. I mean, when it comes to Force training, Qui-Gon would be fine, but as for lightsabers, unfortunately, Qui-Gon was born in just the wrong time, because since Sith hadn't been seen in thousands of years, the Jedi had all but stopped teaching how to do lightsaber on lightsaber combat. But at the same time, Qui-Gon was Dooku's apprentice, and he could have had the best lightsaber training in the galaxy if he'd wanted it, so he has no one to blame but himself. But I can't stress enough how important it would be to have a mentor that would do things their own way, and show me that the council isn't always right about everything. And that's why Qui-Gon Jinn is ranked at number 8 on my list. Alright, coming up as the 7th best mentor is Anakin Skywalker. The great thing about getting trained by him is that he goes above and beyond the average Jedi teachings. Sure, you'll learn how to use the Force and swing a lightsaber, but you'll also learn how to, I don't know, survive on a Venator trapped with an army of clones who are actively trying to kill you. Yeah, stuff like that. Also, he's apparently really progressive for a Jedi. Remember that one episode in Clone Wars where Ahsoka and Barriss Offee get trapped in that catacomb on Geonosis, and Luminara Unduli is like, well, looks like they're gone. Time to get new Padawans, eh, Skywalker? And then Anakin's like, yeah, go suck on a cactus, loser. I'm gonna try to help them. My point is that Anakin would actually look out for you and try to help you as best as he could. Most Jedi aren't too good at critical thinking, but that's where Anakin excels, and he would definitely teach his Padawan how to think on their feet and innovate. Plus, Ahsoka did turn out pretty good, so he gets at least some credit for that. Also, I just know in advance that some of you are going to be in my comment section trying to cook me alive for not putting Darth Vader on this list because, oh, well, you know, in the Legends, Darth Vader did train Starkiller, so technically he qualifies for this list. Okay, first of all, I have played none of the Force Unleashed games and read none of the books, so I'm simply not qualified to talk about Starkiller in any way whatsoever. And second of all, if I include one piece of Legends content, I have to include all the others. And not only have I not read almost any books or comics, I just quite frankly don't want to go through every piece of Star Wars text ever created to find random characters to put on this list. So that's that. Now, coming up at number 6 is, yes, the Negotiator, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Having Obi-Wan as a teacher would be really good in some ways, but at the same time, really annoying in other ways. Obi-Wan is a much more rigid person than Anakin, and during the prequels more than ever, he's very much a, oh, the Jedi say to do it this way, so that's how we're going to do it. Which is good sometimes, for sure, but there are other times that I want my mentor to tell me, look kid, this is how we're supposed to do it, but screw it, let's give this other way a shot. That's why Anakin is slightly above Obi-Wan on this list, because Anakin would teach me that sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. But one area where Obi-Wan would really excel is showing me how to be witty. Holy cow, if you were hanging around with this guy for a couple years, you would have a tongue quicker than a coyote. I mean, I already think that my one-liner game is alright, but give me a few years with old Ben and I'd be zinging people left and right. I'd be unstoppable. As for showing me how to use the Force and swing a lightsaber, Obi-Wan would probably be a pretty generic teacher. That's the thing about the Jedi and the Sith. Aside from a few notable exceptions, basically any mentor you get will be able to show you how to fight reasonably well. Like, there's not any one Force wielder on this list who's notably bad with a lightsaber, you know? Anyway, that's all to say that, oh, and before I forget, hello there everybody, my name is Jedward, and if you're enjoying this video so far, do yourself and me a favor and smash that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Also, I make tons of content about Star Wars and other franchises like it, so go ahead and check out some more of that after you finish this video. Thank you, and now we get into some of the more, well, there's no easy way to put this, awful mentors on this list. And who else is better to put at number 5 than Darth Maul? The main reason that I think Maul would be a pretty bad mentor is because he's never really had any experience. He barely made this list as it is, and only because he took Savage under his wing, and to be completely fair, he barely even trained Savage, because Savage found him after being somewhat trained by both Ventress and Count Dooku. To top it all off, Maul was completely out of the game for more than a decade, abandoned on that weird trash world. So not only has he had very little experience as a mentor, if any at all, he also just wouldn't be as good at teaching how to use the dark side, because he himself hasn't practiced it in years. That was actually one of my biggest gripes with the Clone Wars show, was the fact that Maul came back basically from the dead and was stronger than ever before, but he was still a great character, so everyone kind of let it slide. When it comes to teaching though, I have my doubts about how good at it he would really be. However, I would still rather have him as a teacher than the next character on this list, who is none other than Luke Skywalker. Now, if the Star Wars sequels had left Luke alone, then I have no idea how we'd be answering this question, but thankfully, Disney came out swinging and turned Luke into a deadbeat loser who could barely even teach a couple of students anything about the Force. And when one of his students had a couple of dark thoughts, Luke went full savage on him. The problem is that Rian Johnson purposely wrote Luke to be a bad teacher so that he could break him down to the dirt and then show how much better Rey was. And before any of you comment anything, do not even try to tell me that Luke actually taught Rey anything. Miss Perfect over here didn't need his help, you see, because she was already so gifted in every way. In fact, she was better than him. So unfortunately, I have to say that because of the way he was written in the sequels, I don't think that he'd be a very good teacher. And heck, would you want to get taught by some grumpy old guy who hates his life and wishes he was dead? I mean, yeah, it would be awesome to get trained by Return of the Jedi Luke, and that would definitely be way higher on this list, but that's not who we have. We got Mr. Green Alien Milk over here, so thanks for that, Ryan. For number 3, we have the first bounty hunter on this list, Jango Fett. Jango taught Boba a lot of what he knew before he died, and that's where Boba got his arsenal, his ship, and his armor. However, being taught by Jango, if you were anyone other than his literal son, would kind of suck, because he would hang you out to dry so quick, it's not even funny. I mean, yeah, you could learn some skills, I guess, but if you look at Attack of the Clones, Jango literally chose to go kill the assassin that he sent to kill his target, rather than go kill Padme himself. That's cold. But again, Jango is one of those people who's barely on this list, and it's only because he taught his 10-year-old son a thing thing or two. However, I'd still rather have him train me than the second to worst character on this list, who is the one and only Supreme Leader Snoke. And the reason for this? Bro, I don't even know what Snoke did. I know that he took Kylo Ren under his wing after Kylo Ren destroyed Luke's Jedi Order, but after that, I have no idea how much Snoke actually added to Kylo Ren's training. Again, thanks to the terrible writing of the sequels, I just have no idea whatsoever if Snoke was a good teacher or not, or heck, I have no idea what Snoke even was, to be frank, because there was that one scene in Rise of Skywalker with those weird Snoke clone things, so don't even get me started on that. It's one of those situations where I wouldn't want him to be my mentor solely because I have no idea what I'm in for. Anyway, now on to the final teacher in this video, and the worst teacher that you could possibly have in all of Star Wars. And it's none other than Darth Sidious himself. Now hey, Sidious would be a great teacher to learn skills from. He could teach you how to use the dark side of the Force probably better than anyone, and he certainly knows his way around a lightsaber. So you may be asking, why is he the worst mentor to have in all of Star Wars? And if you want the answer, all you have to do is look at his former apprentices. Darth Maul, punished and tortured for literally existing. Count Dooku, essentially killed by Palpatine in favor of a new apprentice. Even Darth Vader, Sidious literally planned to replace with Luke Skywalker, and he actually specially designed Vader's suit to be vulnerable to Force lightning in case Sidious ever needed to kill Vader lickety-split. And that's the problem with Sidious. He would turn on you faster than a pitbull named Fifi or Cupcake would turn on a 3-year-old child. He does not care. He's so power hungry that the chance of you having a long life while under his teaching is incredibly slim. However, this is also the reason that Sidious is such an incredible villain. And actually...